Hello everyone, I'm Michael Serapio. Welcome to Profile. Since 1970, Canada has maintained bilateral relations with Taiwan. Also known as the Republic of China, Canada's relationship with the Asian state is, diplomatically speaking, unofficial. And that's because Canada has a one China policy, a policy that officially recognizes the People's Republic of China, or the PRC. Still, Canada and Taiwan have much in common: economic ties, cultural ties, people-to-people relationships. They also face at least one common challenge: foreign interference from the PRC. It's just one matter I discussed recently here in Ottawa with Taiwan's representative to Canada, and here now is that conversation with Harry Ho-jen Tseng in Profile. So as you and I are speaking right now, the public inquiry into foreign interference continues to do its work here in Ottawa. And they are looking at these incidents of foreign interference in Canadian democracy and the People's Republic of China, the PRC. It has been pointed to as one of the main sources of that interference, marked by intimidation, election meddling, spying. You know, I wonder, as Taiwan is on the front line to foreign interference when it comes to Beijing, do any of the tactics that you've heard about here in Canada surprise you in any way?
Not really surprise me. I think there is some differences in terms of the challenge we face in Taiwan of the foreign interference. In the scales and in the degree of the sense of crisis, I think there is a clear difference between Canada and Taiwan. Certainly, this foreign interference all concerning our national security, but in Taiwan, the foreign interference can happen in real and in virtual spaces, making it very difficult for us to tackle. And here in Canada, I seem to see that the discussion still more or less focused on the elections in 2019 and 2021, and focusing more on the diasporas, the communities of the recent immigrants. But in Taiwan, the foreign interference, or the PRC interference, is targeting the whole of society, and people from all walks of life can be a target of the interference. So there is a basic difference between our two countries.
Basic difference. Could you build upon that? If you could paint a picture for us, just how does foreign interference manifest itself in the everyday lives of the Taiwanese people?
Well, it takes many shapes. It can be from the cyberspace. It can be also from the collaboration in a local community. And as we see the advancement of the technology, and it's including the deepfake technology, it makes it very difficult for us to safeguard our cyberspace and to really secure our information environment. But all in all, I think there is much that we can learn from each other.
Mm-hmm. You know, it seems to be noted more and more amongst Western countries, at the very least, that China's ambitions have been growing, the PRC's ambitions have been growing. And so we've seen that manifest itself in terms of greater intimidation on the part of the PRC, in terms of more aggressive policies when it comes to different countries. I'm wondering if Taiwan has noticed an increased aggression in the last few years as well.
I think so. I think there is a sense of a crisis growing since the 2018 local election, when China stepped up its pressure and spread the disinformation campaign in a way that I have never seen before. And that is a very important reason that we learn how to tackle the cognitive warfare or information warfare from China nowadays.
So, how does Taiwan tackle the challenge? Well, it engages in what's described as a P3 solution, a public-private partnership. The private side involves non-governmental players that call out foreign interference and disinformation. And on the public governmental side, well, it employs a strategy of identifying disinformation, debunking it, combating it, and prosecuting any parties that are involved. A process which Representative Tseng says needs the involvement of everyone in Taiwan.
To be able to identify disinformation, you probably need to educate your people and to cultivate the capacity among your people so that they can differentiate, they can know how to recognize fake news in everything they read. And into the second phase about debunk disinformation, it will mean to verify and to clarify. And this is where we developed something very well known as the 222 approach. I don't know if you have heard about 222. In each government agency or each ministry, there is a spokesperson. The spokesperson is usually given the responsibility to watch suspicious content online. And once fake news is detected, this spokesperson is supposed to respond within 2 hours with a press release of fewer than 200 words and better attached with 2 pictures or 2 diagrams. So it's 2 hours, 200 words, and 2 pictures. The 222 is the basic pattern that we deal with. This is from the government front. And into the third stage, that to combat disinformation, to combat the dissemination of the disinformation, basically we are talking about to remove and to stop circulation of the disinformation. And this is a very important part of it. We have a special government agency called NCC, National Communication Commission, overseeing the regulatory practice of the media, overseeing fact-checking on constant basis, and coming into the final stage will be punishing the perpetrator. And that is also a challenge because we are a democratic country. We don't want to safeguard our information environment at the expense of freedom of expression. So we need to revise some of our domestic laws. That is something we are still doing. And this is all only from the public front. But from the private front, it is also very interesting that in Taiwan, we have quite a few civic organizations specialized in tackling issues arisen from different phases of the disinformation spreading. For example, some are very good at analyzing the so-called TTP, the tactics, the technology, and the procedure of the disinformation campaign. Some are very good at fact-checking, some at promoting media literacy, and some at answering inquiries. These civic organizations, they don't have a centralized system, but they are actually working independently, but they collaborate with each other, exchange with each other on a regular basis. More importantly, I think, and which is most remarkable, that these civic organizations are doing all this on volunteer basis. They declined the subsidies from the government in order to keep neutrality. This is something I find most interesting in Taiwan, and perhaps it's something that we can share with Canada, with the world.
I'll pick up on that in a moment. But, as we see this type of interference from the PRC, I'm wondering, and of course, as you say, 2 very different situations. Beijing has never given up its claim on Taiwan. But in terms of the Canadian context, why do you think Beijing, why does the PRC meddle in Canadian domestic affairs?
Well, I think from the Chinese Communist Party's point of view, they have a different view of the world, and they consider those with different ideologies as potential enemy. This is a very important reason they need to so-called to change the international order. They think the international order as it stands today is not to their national interest. I think this is very important. They must have felt some kind of threat from the democratic systems as a whole. So they need to find a loophole from the democratic countries. And by definition, the democratic country have the freedoms, the fundamental freedoms of speech, press, association. It is easier for them to find a loophole. And Canada is such a country for them to target.
And in terms of Taiwan, of course, the very fact that the PRC has never given up its claim on Taiwan, there is this growing fear amongst many foreign policy analysts that Taiwan risks becoming the next Ukraine, in that both countries are beside a superpower, in that there are claims of that superpower on those separate territories. Are you nearing a crisis point in Taiwan when it comes to the PRC?
I really wouldn't describe the situation we face in Taiwan as crisis. There's tension, there's challenge. We need to tackle properly because it can get worse. But the situation where we are today, I think it's not crisis.
Is there a message to the world, though? Because there are many eyes on Taiwan right now, in particular the Taiwan Strait. The military operations and exercises that the PRC undertakes there, it has drawn so much attention right now. Is there something that the rest of the world needs to be aware of?
For every military exercise waged by the PRC against Taiwan, there's always something we can find different from the previous times. We are learning from how we confront these military exercises. But there is also one commonality in between all these military exercises, including the most serious one after Nancy Pelosi, then a U.S. House Speaker's visit to Taiwan in August 2022. Well, I think the commonality is that these exercises are not a prelude to attack Taiwan. It is meant to intimidate the Taiwanese people. And they would like to see the people in Taiwan get panic. They would like to see our government fall into disarray. But we should not be intimidated. So I think that is a very important take from all this military exercises. And this is why I say this is not a crisis time for us yet. We shouldn't be complacent, I know that. Some people criticize Taiwanese people on the street if you interview them, including this most recent military exercise. They didn't seem to take it very seriously. But the reason they didn't show deep concern is because they didn't see the government get panic. The government remains very calm from the very moment of beginning to the end. And so there is no need for our people to get panic. But the Chinese People's Liberation Army, the PLA, must beware that Taiwan is not defenseless because it is only because this is peacetime, if I can put it this way, that their war planes and their warships can get that close to Taiwan. If this is a wartime, they are all under the range of our missiles. They won't be able to get so close. So if there is a real hostile intent, our responses, the responses from our like-minded countries, including the United States, would be very different. I think China knows that very well.
Now, a few years ago, the United States and Canada sent military ships through the Strait of Taiwan, and that was to push back on PRC territorial claims to that strait, but also to push back against belligerence from Beijing vis-a-vis Taiwan. How meaningful was that gesture?
Very important. Canada, in the recent years, especially after the announcement of the Indo-Pacific strategy in November 2022, you already have 4 times transiting the Taiwan Strait side by side with the U.S. naval ships. We appreciate that very much because the Taiwan Strait should be international water. There is a good part of the Taiwan Strait is a high sea, but China refused to look at it that way. They claim that Taiwan Strait is not an international water, but you defy what China claimed by action. That is very important to us, and we are very happy that there are other like-minded countries joining U.S. and Canada in transiting the Taiwan Strait.
As countries like the United States and Canada demonstrate this type of support for keeping the Taiwan Strait international waters, I also do wonder about the people of Taiwan. You say that the actions of the PRC currently should not intimidate people in Taiwan, but does it at all create a chill effect amongst the Taiwanese people when they talk about issues of sovereignty and how they'd like to see Taiwan evolve in future?
This effect in Taiwan can go different directions. I mean, it can create a chilling effect of people tend to keep quiet. It can also create an entirely opposite effect for people to really pay more attention to the danger of China, and then our people should become even more vigilant. So this is what's happening today.
Mm-hmm. When you say that, my mind does go to Hong Kong, because I'm wondering whether or not Hong Kong is a cautionary tale for the people of Taiwan. Because of course, when the PRC took over from the British in 1997, they agreed to this one country, two systems arrangement, whereby Hong Kong was to be granted 50 years of autonomy to be its own system. And yet that's not what we've seen. We have seen increased crackdowns on criticism and dissent of Beijing. What effect has the Hong Kong experience had on the Taiwanese people?
Well, thank you for asking this question. Hong Kong as an issue is long gone. I feel very sorry for that. And I hope the Hong Kong issue can always remind us of what's happening today. So don't forget about Hong Kong. So I appreciate this question. As you know, when one country, two systems was formulated in China, it was meant to use on Taiwan, as a matter of fact. And it ended up that Hong Kong became the testing ground for that formula, not Taiwan. So what happened to Hong Kong under that framework of one country, two systems, which is supposed to use in Taiwan, can bring up the same kind of lesson to the Taiwanese people, that if you still ascribe to the one country, two systems, what happens to Hong Kong is what's going to happen in Taiwan. But that is going a little bit too far, because from the very beginning, the one country, two systems has no market in Taiwan at all, because the situation between Hong Kong and Taiwan are totally different. We have a government of our own, and we have our own army. We have our own, the systems entirely different from mainland China. As for Hong Kong, it's a colony, and it doesn't have a final say for the future of its own territory. In Taiwan, it's totally different. So, but our people remember what happened to Hong Kong very clearly. In 2019, when the anti-extradition protest was going on in Hong Kong, more than 1 million or 2 million Hong Kong citizens took to the street. All those demonstrations are well remembered by the Taiwanese people. We will not let that happen in Taiwan.
Because despite the shadow of the PRC, Taiwan has evolved to become a very flourishing democracy. It is an economic powerhouse. It has distinguished itself in electronics and in semiconductors. How important is it for Taiwan's survival, at the very least the survival of the status quo, for the world to know that fact about Taiwan?
It's very important. What people see Taiwan as a genuine democracy today, we must know that before democracy was possible, there was a few decades in Taiwan when Taiwan was regarded as an economic miracle. We need to have economic prosperity before we can move to a very healthy democracy as what is happening today in Taiwan. So the economic achievement in Taiwan is not only economy, it is everything to us. It is the lifeline of our political system as well. So this is why we take great importance to all those economic agreements or economic arrangement that we enter into with Canada or with other countries.
I want to get back to trade here. You know, 2 years ago, the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, she coined the term friendshoring, which essentially is shorthand for allies to work together to secure critical supply lines and limit punitive actions from hostile countries. How does Taiwan fit into that type of economic theory when it comes to Canada, when it comes to the United States and the other democracies around the world?
This friendshoring is something that we have put into practice since years ago. It is a new label, but as a matter of fact, it is all coming from the concept of building up an economic resiliency or a supply chain resilience. And it's very clear to many people that it's getting more and more difficult and even more and more dangerous to do business in China. So moving out of China becomes a way for you to sustain your industry. And friendshoring came out after that. It is not actually heralding, not actually before what's happening in China. So it is a recognition with hindsight of what's happening in China. And so you need friendly countries to trade with each other, to invest in each other. This is that kind of background. And Taiwan fits very well to that, especially because the chips, the semiconductors is such an important ingredient in almost all the important high-tech industries today. If we are talking about the coming age of AI, AI cannot survive, AI cannot thrive without advanced chips from Taiwan. And when I say advanced chip, we take up 90% of the global market. We are talking about chips below 18 nanometers. And we have TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, is able to make 3 nanometer and 2 nanometers of chips. We are the only country in the world that is able to do that. So engaging Taiwan is only good for your supply chain resilience.
Mm-hmm. Engaging Taiwan. And before we're done, I do want to talk a little bit more about engaging the PRC, though, because I'm sure you're aware of this. Here in Canada, there is this debate between diplomats, current and past, foreign policy analysts, current and past, as to how Canada should be engaging the PRC. Some cautioning, saying we should be wary about engagement, others saying that we should be engaging more. What would you say to that debate?
Every country has its own national interest. It would be asking too much for Canada to stop altogether what you are dealing with China, and that is not what I'm asking. I think there's a lot more that that Canadian decision makers can consider, though. You see, your one China policy does not have a fixed definition. Your one China policy is very different from the one China principle that China claims. China claims that you have a one China policy, or sometimes they confuse you by saying that you have a one China principle, because one China principle is the term that used only by China, which means that there is only one China and the PRC is the only legitimate government of that China, and Taiwan is part of China. In that kind of trilogy, you would have no room to turn that Taiwan is already part of China. But your one China policy does not carry that kind of definition. Your one China policy is very different from one China policy of any country. There is a big room for you to show your flexibility. And at this time, I think the fact that China is confronting all kinds of difficulties at home and abroad, the decision makers in Canada may want to think about how you can relax your one China policy. Because to begin with, there is no fixed definition to circumscribe. You don't need to circumscribe yourself with your one China policy. There are a lot you can do, even with that framework.
Can you clarify that in terms of showing more flexibility? How should Canada be showing more flexibility with that policy?
What you have been doing, transiting the Taiwan Strait, is something very encouraging to us. Those issues that have the bilateral element, bilateral nature, that you alone can decide to go ahead, you actually can be more at ease to do that. You don't need to be deterred by China all the time. A lot of time that you can go ahead without needing to worry too much about the retaliation, because China cannot retaliate in every move you do, really. I think that's more importantly, Canada as one of the leading countries in NATO and one of the important countries in G7, your position can affect a lot of countries, not only within the G7 or NATO, but countries as a whole. So I hope the Canadian politicians would know that you are bigger than you think, and you can take up greater leadership. Even if you are only seeing that as a division of labor, you have a greater leadership to play. This is what I genuinely fear. You don't need to be too modest. You are a strong country. When you say you are a medium state, you're always thinking about your population. Well, population-wise, 40 million people is not a small number either. And you have a huge territory and ample natural resources. You can play a bigger role than you are today.
And that is my conversation with Taiwan's representative to Canada, Harry Ho-jen Tseng. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. We'll see you again on the next episode of Profile.